All right, welcome to the Credit and Collection News podcast. We have our usual cast of characters that are here with us today. We're gonna talk about the CFPB. We're gonna talk about the FTC. We're gonna talk about the DFPI. If we get to New York, we're gonna talk about New York. There's a lot of stuff happening in the industry, so we're bringing the group back together: Stephanie, Rob, Joanne, and John. And as we talk about what's happening in the industry, let's kind of delve right into it. Let's start with our friends at the CFPB. We can even start, if you guys want, talking about a little budget disagreement coming from our friends either at the White House or our friends from Massachusetts and our Senator Elizabeth Warren, where we're talking about two completely different, either the cost of the CFPB or the actual benefits of the CFPB in billions of dollars. So, John, I know. Hey, this is near and dear to your wallet and heart. So why don't you go ahead and start us off and let's have a little fun with this because
Yeah, no,
we're only billions of dollars off in our budgets. So, John, I've had it.
yeah, no, so both these pieces of research, and I really wanna put air air quotes around the word research. Um, it's funny because there were 2 pieces of research, one saying how much the mothballing of the CFPB has cost consumers, and the other was from the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House was saying how much the CFPB has cost, industry and consumers. And you know where my brain went to back to in the early days of debt buying. Some of you may remember this, but there were 2 old debt buyers. I guess that's an age-insensitive term. There were 2 very mature debt buyers down near the stage that started throwing fists at one another. Um, and when you see very mature people fight, it's just you can't avert your eyes, and it's really ugly. And it always kind of goes into grappling and heavy breathing, and it was just not something anybody would see. But for some reason, I thought about that when I thought about these 2 pieces of research. So the Council of Economic Advisors, I didn't even know what they were thinking. They said that we'd promulgated the CFPB, had promulgated like 400 laws when it was like 164, and that's like I think in the first paragraph. When you've got just glaring huge errors in the executive summary of a document, it's like what follows usually is not worth reading. Adam Levitin, who I'm a fan of, a longtime professor at Georgetown University, great policy wonk, and I have a deep affinity for people that I think get it right. He took this thing to task and just ripped it to shreds very, very quickly and sort of like, bam, it's gone. And it's not, I mean, it's not good research. I wish they'd had my old markets team take a look at it. People like Wei Zhang and Leslie Parrish and those folks there, because they would have helped them get it right. Okay, so that was one piece that came out. Ugh. The other piece made me even more angry because it talked about
Well, we can't have you angry, John, because you're gonna take up the whole hour right away.
yeah, well, I'm probably done after this. But no, I think that this made me angry too because it sort of positioned what Russell Vought has done. And make no mistake, I'm no fan of what Russell Vought's doing to the CFPB right now. I think it's bad for consumers. It's bad for responsible industry. Um, but it talked about how much consumers have been were paying because of overdraft fees and credit card late fees. When I'm like, I think I've said this before. Under Rohit Chopra, like in my future state, that's a better future state, overdraft, credit card late fees would have been set around $15, maybe 15 to 18. Um, Consumers would have been benefiting from a savings of what? My gosh, 12 to $20, like already. It probably would have gone through, not been sued into a coma, and consumers would be benefiting. Responsible banks would still be able to charge something to recoup their costs of loss and recovery, and there would be some incentive factor to keep um, consumers from defaulting and paying credit card late fees. Like that could have been done. It wasn't because the Chopra regime went aggressive at $8. I mean, $8 was so low, it was guaranteed to be sued. And quite frankly, if it had not been sued into a coma, it probably would have been CRA'd. And again, Congressional Review Act, essentially when Congress weighs in and they basically rule against a ruling, they salt the earth. You can't go back into that policy area and do anything. So that was one. I was irritated by that because I think it was like just a bad example. The other one was the overdraft, and I've said before, the overdraft rules were set so low, it was a guaranteed layup for Congress for that rule to be subjected to the Congressional Review Act, and it was totally unnecessary. I mean, CBA, I think Consumer Bankers had gone on record that, like, all of their members had stopped charging overdraft fees, or they dropped them incredibly. Like, it wasn't an area that needed a policy intervention. The market was fixing it, in my opinion, and I think Rohit knew that. But he set these so low, and in that way, he's harmed consumers because no one can really come back in and address overdraft fees right now. That earth is salted. You can't grow any rules there. So the very document that was designed to talk about how Russell Vought was hurting the Bureau was really a treatise on how Rohit Chopra and his regime hurt consumers by going for headlines, not really responsible policy. I don't like shoddy research. I don't like research that's written for headlines. I like objective research, and I think the people that are doing this research on the public dime have an obligation to get it right and to be objective.
I would have to agree with you guys. Like I said, and especially when you're looking at a difference of billions of dollars on opposite sides, it makes no sense, and it almost felt like it was just
By the way, Steve, one last thing. I promise I'll shut up.
never.
It prompted me to take a very amateurish run at Gemini Pro, my Gemini Pro subscription. And I said, Gemini, create an index for me of all of the consumer financial services industries stock performance from 2012 to present. Okay. I got like a really impressive number. Bam, like up like that. And then I said, underlay that with the NASDAQ and the Dow for the same period. And they are much lower, the slope of those lines are much lower. I mean, if the Bureau did such damage, why did the consumer financial services industry stock price? They had a heyday. It was better. I couldn't do this when I was at the Bureau because they were all prohibited holdings, but I kind of wished I'd invested in all of those when I was at the Bureau. I'd be over retired now.
John, great analysis. I think you're absolutely right. I think it goes back to the issue of, at the end of the day, this was an agency that was supposed to be apolitical, and then you got both sides coming out with very political reports. I think where the administration missed the boat here is something that we talked about since the beginning of Dodd-Frank. And that is ultimately what this did is, yeah, all these companies are doing great, and they're all big companies. They're all on the NASDAQ. So it was that, they came into the crisis where we had to implement the CFPB, we had to implement these rules, we had to build this infrastructure to prevent too big to fail. When at the end of the day, it just prevented too small to succeed. Now, I know that doesn't, on the consumer side, something that Elizabeth Warren wants to think about, but at the end of the day, it does harm consumers because we're dealing with bigger companies. It's, the barrier to entry to get into this industry can be tough. If you can get in, obviously there's private equity and everybody pushing it in, but they're getting in for the quick exit. So it's ultimately to fuel and get bigger companies. And that's what the CFPB and this whole regime ultimately, and Dodd-Frank has, in my opinion, has done.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, was it Jamie Dimon? He said the quiet part out loud. Didn't he say the CFPB was their deep moat dug around JP Morgan Chase?
Yep.
But at the same time, I'd like to balance that a little bit. Like, I don't want to fly on a small, undercapitalized airline. And I think that to be a financial service provider where you're putting at risk the consumer's life savings, I think there is some level of scale that is necessary. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love fintechs. I love EWA, love buy now, pay later. Love anyone trying to remake this industry. But yeah, I mean, when you enjoy, the federal government insuring your deposits and things like that, and I think Rohit was not wrong here. He felt like when you enjoy those sorts of protections and that kind of moat, there is a higher obligation or duty to serve. But at the same time, also, there does seem to be like some level of asset barrier before you can safely engage and take care of consumer savings.
Stephanie, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think you kind of summed it up, Stephen. You said they're billions apart. I see both as political statements. And, I don't disagree with anything Joanne and John have said. I didn't spend enough time really dissecting them, to be completely honest, because that's exactly how they hit me. And I'm like, how can you have, to your point, John, credible research saying there's almost $20 billion in difference, right? So to me, it was a lot of more of the same of people are trying to message their perspectives of what that agency has or hasn't done for their own initiatives and purposes. What I think will be interesting is just, I don't know if this was on, but they just had the en banc argument in the union litigation. I always forget the name of the CFPB employee union, but in any event, that was, I think, 2 days ago.
National Treasury employees.
Thank you. It's not hard to remember. I just don't keep it in my head for some reason.
And worth remembering.
Yeah.
Well, but getting
Now-
a read on
now,
it,
Joanne,
it's gonna go.
The NTEU does lots of good work.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. And to me, that's more interesting than whether the CFPB saved money, didn't save money. And I don't even know how you show. Like, I know that we talk about the CFPB is going to constrict credit. Has it constricted credit? In what ways? And does that matter? Some states are constricting credit, right? Take New York's new bill on BNPL. It would essentially end BNPL in New York as an option for consumers. If Colorado, with its opt-out on DIDMAC, so it's like, some states are actually saying that's fine. We actually want less opportunities for our citizens to get financing or credit products that they may need for one reason or another. So, yeah, that's all I got, Steve.
Well, I was just going to throw. Before we do that, I was just going to throw out the whole concept. Like when New York said, "Hey, we can't have payday loans," everybody just crossed the river and going over to New Jersey to start pulling out payday loans. And of course, Guido, the killer pimp, suddenly started giving out payday loans in New York, unregulated. So the whole idea behind it is, you can try to regulate something out of business, but the reality is, what states can only do so much, cities can only do so much, and you're not going to be able to really get rid of something once it's there. So that's kind of what you run into. But
Steve,
I didn't mean to interrupt there, John.
yeah, in the court case, I want to circle back to that. I mean, I'm generally a free market person and a capitalist, but at the same time, I'm a fan of any union that fights back against the illegal termination of employees. And with the National Treasury Employees Union, that is exactly what they're doing, and I fully support that. But the court case is largely on the Russell Vought side. It's a mishmash of unforced errors, right? Because, was Russell Vought trying to right-size the Bureau legally, or was he trying to close the Bureau, which, again, is likely, certainly against the will of Congress, and only the Supreme Court will sort this mess out eventually. So it, in some ways, it was almost like the fight between the two debt buyers near the stage at RMAI back when it was called DBA. I'm not sure how it's going to bounce, but the fact that Vought said on the Charlie Kirk podcast he was going to close the Bureau goes against any argument that he was trying to legally right-size the Bureau. But the other thing that hangs out there is that the Bureau, the Congress did cut the budget. They cut it by like 46.5% or 46%. So that'll have to be dealt with. But also keep in mind, someone I know did this research that panel. Sometimes there's some cases that they've thought about them and worked on them for a year. So we've got a year of people being paid at the Bureau to largely do very little. And there could be another year. I mean, it's pretty hard to be motivated to do work when your boss is like, literally he's trying to fire you, but it's just annoying technicalities keep that from happening.
Right.
Right.
I don't know if Stephanie, John, if you had the pleasure of listening for 3 hours of that oral argument. It was quite painful. But I did. And
What'd you think?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what was your impression?
yeah, so my impression was a couple things.
Who won?
One, nobody won. Nobody won at all. And I had to tell you, I felt the panel was really, I felt the panel was throwing up their hands. Like they couldn't get a handle. Now, the three that had already listened to it knew the issues, but the other 7 or 6 did not. And it was they were grappling about what to do. I mean, at one point saying to both sides, well, what should the order say? Like my sense after 3 hours of, you know, a lot of back and forth was that they're going to punt it back down to the DC circuit. That's my sense. Now, that could be their remand and they could ultimately appeal and go up to the Supreme Court, but I think they're going to punt it back down. They do not want to make the full panel in and of themselves does not want to make a decision about this at all. And so the issue really boils down to, was the injunction overbroad? That's what it was. And there are good arguments and bad arguments for both sides. This whole idea of, yes, it is completely stupid for the administration and Vought to go onto Charlie Kirk and all these things saying we're shutting down the Bureau. Ridiculous, okay? But at the end of the day, that is not final agency action. It is not. We have an Administrative Procedures Act. And they could have done it through the administrative. I mean, he sits at OMB, which is the agency that basically governs the Administrative Procedures Act. And he didn't follow the own act of which he is in charge of. And all he had to do was he could have done a RIF. Yeah, there would have been litigation, but you could have done the RIF. Simple, easy, and then figure it all out. Instead, you've got this ridiculous, and I think these reports are a result of the ridiculousness of the lack of really any clear strategy by the administration. I know what their end game is, but they have no strategy to get there. Zero. On the same token, the union's attorney, and she did a very good job. I thought she was very good. But Jennifer, she was very good. She was very well prepared. She was very good. But they're basing why we need to keep the agency open is because what's the NCLC going to do? Because they rely on the CFPB's reports. That's a lousy argument. That is a really lousy argument. So it was a real dog and pony show for 3 hours. And my sense is they don't know, the panel does not know what to do. And the easiest thing for them to do is to put it back down to the DC circuit. And now the judge is going to basically have to revisit the injunction. And there's going to have to be more of a hearing of what the injunction should be. And then but this thing is not going to get resolved. One of the judges made a really good point. He said, look, I think we all agree that Congress is the one who's going to decide whether there's going to be a CFPB or not. And so you could do what you want here, but in 3 years, someone else is going to come in and they could do what they want with the Bureau. It's not like the Bureau is ever going to go away unless Congress says so. So it was very, very fascinating. I'll make one further point. I think it also goes to show of how poorly written Title 10 is. Title 10, which created the Bureau, was poorly drafted because it was based on the assumption that you're always going to have your guy or your girl in there doing the things that the Congress that set up the CFPB is going to do. And that's not how you wrote the statute. You gave too much discretion to one person. And if one person can make the CFPB a behemoth, or they can make it nothing. That's what the statute says. And so if you want to fix that and not have to do this for generations to come, you need to rewrite Title 10.
Yeah, that reminds me, Joanne. The one is you're showing all the passion of a really good operations person who sees bad process. But in my opinion, the best president this country ever has seen, or is Harry Truman, who said the best way to get rid of a bad law is to enforce it. And that led me to think Rohit sort of enforced or underscored why a single director has too much power, because he did things like that. Again, in a manner that was very different than Richard Cordray, very different than Kathy Kraninger. So we got to that point.
Yeah. I know we've hit on this many times, but we've said that if they adopted the FTC's 5-person commission, you've got a whole different bureau.
Or do you? I mean, we're still waiting for what, Humphrey's executor play out. I mean, if the president can fire the opposition party commissioners, then that's not a safe port for the Bureau to look at right now either. So that's still up in the air. But definitely, I think it showed, it really underscored the director had too much power. and used it in a manner, I think, again, that drew the ire of the White House in such a way that the bat phone was picked up and they called Elon Musk and his crew to come in and do their things, which were illegal and dumb and have led to basically this kind of operational and legal mess that we're in right now.
Yeah. If, for example, the change in the complaint database that, for now complaints with the CFPB, I mean, you can regulate to death or you can unregulate and take away the power to do it. So the next thing you know, that whether the CFPB exists or not, if there's no power to do anything or they're not doing anything or enforcing anything, then what's the value of even having it? And I think that the industry recognizes if you don't have one federal power there, basically saying, "Hey, get your shit together and get everything going," then you have 55 different regulatory bodies that are saying that, and then you've got a complete nightmare of trying to handle how do you work with the states, which is that's the other half of this section to talk about, because the California DFPI has now decided they want to be the former CFPB of years ago, and enforce it. And how do you do business without having your California basically reaching into your business and telling you what to do? Which again, I'll turn that up to the group and say, how do you respond to that, or how do you deal with that?
Sure, but before the group does, I just want to remind people, like Steve, I think I heard what I consider a faulty assumption. The Bureau is not dead. It's doing things, and in the most deregulatory of times. I mean, I've been in this business since Reagan's first term as president. In the most deregulatory of times, debt collectors, debt buyers, they don't get any love, and they never have. And I think Mark Paletta, who's the chief legal officer at the CFPB, I mean, he expressed a document basically with CFPB priorities that included FCRA, FDCPA, and then Joanne and Stephanie may know this, but I mean, some CIDs are quietly that have been dormant for a while are getting revived, and they happen to be in the debt collection space. So that I know of. I mean, other spaces too, I'm sure, but I do know of some of the debt collection space. So it behooves the listeners who are predominantly probably in that debt collection and debt buying space to stay vigilant and don't assume the CFPB is asleep, because it's not, certainly for your market.
No, and I didn't want to imply that they're asleep. It's just more that if they become less and less regulatory, they're not out there making their noise and doing it. They're still in existence. People are still being paid. They're still going through the process. But now you've got the DFBI, the New York DFS, et cetera, that are out there making a lot more noise and wanting to push their own regulations basically across the board. John, I think you were at the meeting when we the original New York City group was basically saying, "Hey, our hands basically are in every consumer, because New York City basically either it came from there, there's a consumer from there, there's business from there, so therefore we can tell you what to do." And we had people from Texas that are saying, "Absolutely not. There's no way that you can tell us what to do." And the reality is, well, I guess they can.
Yeah, I mean, classic example of why what's been done to the CFPB is harmful for responsible industry. Before that was done, state of California, state of New York, city of New York, they felt like they had a partner. They didn't always agree with the partner based on political leadership, but they had a partner who could assist them in protecting consumers. So what happens in a partnership when your partner bails? I mean, you naturally are inclined. I don't care what kind of partnership it is, you sort of have to pick up the slack. So of course they're doing it. And again, California, New York, and New York City have very big resources, but not what the Bureau had. And typically not the time, not the intellectual and institutional knowledge and expertise to engage in APA rulemaking. So you're going to get bad outcomes that are going to hurt responsible industry and downstream consumers. I'd say Russell vote if
It's a John, I'm going to tell you, it is a reality right now. It is a real, Stephanie will tell you, it's like nothing I've ever seen. I call it States Gone Wild. It is like nothing I have ever seen. Because what we used to, you remember with our friend Rich Cordray, what did he say, 8 years ago? I'm going to push the envelope. My job is to push the envelope. Well, now that was one big regulator pushing the envelope. Now you got 50 states pushing the envelope, and it's not California and New York. I'm going to tell you right now, they're there, but there's plenty of other states who are pushing the envelope.
And Richard Cordray is an attorney. And so an attorney, and a highly intelligent attorney saying, I'm going to push
Yeah.
the envelope, who also has a decent amount of humility, that's very different pushing the envelope of what we saw with Rohit Chopra. And I think even you would agree with me on that, Joanne.
Yeah. Until you said the last sentence, yes, I would agree with you in there. I would agree with you there for sure. No, he was. And he also, you know what? He also was a politician. And as much as it was a political agency, I would keep reminding everybody, he was a politician, and he knew what line not to cross and what line to where he just was a better his gambling finesse was a little bit better than Rohit's. I mean, he just had, to your point, he did have a little bit of humility, but he also knew he could read the room, he could take the temperature a lot better than Rohit could do.
And what kind of politician was he, Joanne, before he came to the Bureau?
He was a Republican.
He
was an AG.
Yes. So let's not forget, states are driving responsible industry crazy, but AGs are a somewhat different animal. I mean, I spoke at RMAI recently, and I think the thing was John McNamara Unleashed, but AGs are unchained and unleashed and highly dependent on the sort of the political winds. And they can operate. I mean, so that whoever said 55, why don't we double that? Because each AG doesn't necessarily always tack with, New York DFS or California DFPI, and they can actually act even quicker, and they can push the envelope. But your points, we've got just spiraling chaos in the financial services sector, and the other thing is, I mean, for foreign investment, for any investment, rule of law is so critical. But if the rule of law is subjective or it's elastic, how do you work in that environment?
That's the $1 million question, because you really can't. I mean, if you look at, I guess the next big issue or big thing that's coming down the pike is, we just ran the article on, does the FTC have the authority over the states on AI? Who regulates AI and who can push it? And the FTC, it's a very complex issue to allow the FTC to oversee AI, especially when it comes to how the states regulate it. So I'm going to turn that back to the group and say, how do you manage this? Because AI is becoming a valuable tool, obviously, in the debt collection world, and the financial services, as well as every other piece of.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question, because if we all think about managing or regulating or overseeing AI, and I agree that that's a tall order. We don't even have a working definition consistent across states and the federal government and others of what it even is, right? But it's already being regulated at the state level. I got a question the other day from a company saying, we're being told by an AI provider that they can't use chat to facilitate payments in certain states. And I'm like, what? No, that doesn't exist. I suggested getting a little more information. It turns out what it really is they either have been told or don't want to be told, so they're avoiding, that they're a debt collector in using AI to assist consumers in making payments, right? And this is just payment processing. And so they're saying that they're not allowed in Connecticut and Massachusetts. What it really is a foreign company with no local presence. And if they're concerned about or have been told that is collection activity with an interactive chatbot trying to help fix a payment issue on an account. Yeah, Connecticut doesn't allow you to use people that are offshore for collections, and Massachusetts has requirements about certain activities being conducted from Massachusetts-based branches, and other states have that too. So we don't even need to have a selective approach to regulating AI as a construct, because it's going to be regulated and already is piecemeal through different channels where people determine it qualifies for oversight here, or it's akin to a collector, so you need a license for this or something like that. And I mean, that train's already out of the station.
This is one of the articles where I feel like I can kind of step up to the plate and talk a little bit among these giants of politics in the industry. And when I'm just reading this, explaining when state laws that require alterations to the truthful outputs of AI models. I love that the truthful outputs. AI models are probabilistic engines, right? They are not designed for what you would call truth. They're designed to find what's the next most probable thing to say, like in the case of an LLM. And all of the wording in here about you can't have ideological bias in models and requiring what they call woke AI, which is is just kind of their way of saying don't put guardrails on it, I think, which is, of course, you kind of need those. When you think of some of the models, and AI models are not new. We've had AI modeling for years. We've had decision science for years, going possibly decades for things like scoring and whatnot. And some of the things, if you're talking about lending, if you have a model that just kind of works off of raw, unbiased data and tries to come up with what interest rate that you should charge somebody. But if you've fed into that model certain demographic information, now you have possible disparate treatment and possible protected status issues that you've baked into your model. Would they push back on that? Call it woke AI, right? And that's, I think, a lot of what they're kind of bristling against is when they say truthful outputs. I think that they mean their truth. It's not necessarily objective truth that's qualified and understood on both sides of the aisle. Kind of like these numbers, right? The numbers of on one side of the aisle, they say $200 billion cost, and the other's $19 billion. It's like, whose truth is it? Whose numbers are you going to go with? It's just sort of a truthful outputs. That those two words that really digs me.
Nothing like the politicization of a very new and ill understood technology being tangled with by regulators who are, chronically underfunded at the state level, and they don't have the kind of time that federal regulator may have, and certainly doesn't bode well.
No,
They don't, obviously they don't know how it works. They don't know even what AI is doing, right? They think that it's being trained to do something woke, and in reality it's a large language model, and then they're putting guardrails around it to make sure there's not doing something, treating a particular class poorly.
And I think I'm assuming all of us at some point have engaged with states to sort of help educate them on policy or rules. And again, it's clear they don't. I mean, some of them meet just part of the year. They have day jobs. Regulators, the state legislature folks have day jobs. They just don't have the time to put into this. And I think I might have told this group about the payday lending folks who had to visit a state to tell them the state was going to enact a law that said you couldn't pay a payday debt with a debit card. And they had to go to the state and explain to the state that while debit cards and credit cards are both made out of plastic, the resemblance sort of ends there, that when you're paying with a debit card, you're basically, it's akin to an ACH or just writing a check or even paying cash. But that's, to me, that was a crystal clear example that the states just don't have the ability to dig into the matter and think about it and engage in rulemaking in a highly thoughtful, highly deliberative manner. Not that they're not smart folks. It's just they don't have the kind of dedicated time to work on this stuff. And I think that's where the federal government doesn't always get it right. But I think this group would say Reg F is more good than bad, more right than wrong.
I would agree. But I think you're making an argument, John, for preemption. I mean, if there ever is an argument for preemption, AI is probably the good test case, because what we're going to, if it continues, as we're seeing, all these states are going to come up with these ridiculous type of statutes. Remember, too, a lot of them are driven by high-level consumer advocates, whether it's the NCLC or not, that have their kind of playbook of what the AI world should be, what the guardrails should be around AI. And so they're all going to adopt these, and then they're going to add their little gloss to it. So all these states are going to adopt these ridiculous little, ways of dealing with AI. But AI is if there's anything that's so cross-border, it's AI, right?
Yeah.
And it's foolish. And I will say you can't legislate by executive order, which is something this administration likes to do. But I think that from a policy standpoint, I happen to, dare I say, somewhat agree that AI has got to start at the federal level. The problem is you don't have, as we've said now this is the third webinar, there are no adults in the room who can try to figure this out. This really needs to be thoughtful. This really needs to be strategic. And it has to be set up for the long haul, not for this administration. So that's going to be a big issue.
Yeah, we're watching the balkanization of financial policy in this country. And if we're going to turn ourselves into the Europe before the European Union.
Right.
Which is very scary. I want to toss something out before we run out of time to do that, because today the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, so they finalized their amended debt collection rule, that SHIELD rule, and I wanted to get your input on that, because we just started talking a little bit about Reg F and the FDCPA. I mean, we threw things in, and then now they're jumping all over the federal rules, and the city now wants to regulate not only the industry, but they want to go after the issuers themselves. And they say that it's supposed to clean up the billing mess that's going on in the industry, which of course we all know is, anytime the government starts to interfere with, the industry, it takes a mess and turns it into a bigger mess. So I'm going to let you guys kind of talk a little bit about that before we run out of time, since it's supposedly implementing it starting today.
Well, I think the implementation date, Stephanie, tell me if I'm wrong, is about 6 months away. It's not.
It's right. It's rolling out. It's rolling. Yeah, they've just started releasing all the information today.
Yeah. Well, I haven't. I know there's others that have been following it. I've over the years, I think, Stephanie, through CRC and some of the groups that we get involved in, we have done some comments, but then those comments get withdrawn, and then there's been amendments. Look, at the end of the day, John, you just made the great point. Reg F has worked. I would agree. Reg F has worked. It's not perfect, but it is what it is. It's worked. Now you've got not even a state, you have a city. You have a city. Now it's the largest city in the country telling you and deviating from Reg F. And to me, that's problematic. But not only that, Reg F had within its confines abilities for states to do certain opt-outs and to do exceptions. But New York City said, we're not even going to do that. We're just going to spend 3-4 years developing rules. And now they're going to have this, very overarching, comprehensive set of regulations that I think is going to be problematic. It is going to curb communication between debt collectors and consumers. It's going to impact issuers. It was interesting. I read something yesterday, and I haven't delved into the bill yet. I just not a lot of time. But basically they said, to your point, Steve, we have a billing problem, but we're going to then push it down to the last entity in the food chain that, number one, never had anything to do with the bill. Sometimes doesn't even have access to that information of the bill. We went through this, John, in substantiation in Reg F, and Cordray was smart enough to say, you know what? Not going to happen. Tossed it. So now they kind of want to do a substantiation type of process, which is going to be impossible for third-party debt collectors. It's not their information to substantiate.
Which is acting on bad data without
Yeah.
market expertise. I mean,
Right.
year in, year out, 40% of the Bureau's complaints are continued efforts to collect a debt not owed. Okay, if you could conclude from that that the balances were inaccurate, but come on, if we all know one thing about core systems, banks hate their core systems, but those core processors actually keep accurate balances. They could have other problems, but the accuracy of the balance isn't one. Healthcare, maybe there's a problem with billing. In the telco and utility space, nobody understands those bills, but they're generally probably fairly accurate. 40% of debts assigned by Citibank to debt collectors do not have inaccurate balances. The OCC would shut them down. Like that, talk about a safety and soundness issue. If you can't keep track of how much is owed to you as a bank, I mean, the OCC would shut you down quicker than a hog could eat cabbage.
And you're talking about COBOL systems written 40 years ago that are still in place because they just freaking work.
Yeah, exactly. Well said, Rob.
Well, what do people think about legal challenge? You think there'll be a legal challenge? Heard any scuttle on that?
So looks like ACA is going to challenge.
I gotta believe it. And, don't forget, they made clear, I thought it was interesting how New York City said, we realized there was confusion on whether creditors were included. It's because they weren't. It was a change with what they actually finalized in August of, 2024, did not. The plain language did not include creditors. So then we weren't confused. It appears that maybe they were, and that's why you saw amendments. But now creditors are clearly in. Yes, a lot of it still appears to be, I'm still digesting them, but connected to institution of debt collection procedures like it was under the law that was, or the regulations that came out, 2012 or something like that. But is there going to be pressure from them as well? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. I promise it's being talked about.
I mean, I know I have clients that have moved out of New York completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even New York City.
Just the whole state. Well, yeah, you can't cut out just the city. Yeah.
It just have said, you know what? It's just the ROI is not there. It's just not right.
And I'd like a large scientific survey of consumers asking, which would you rather have? A root canal, a phone call from a debt collector, or a friendly text or email reminder to pay you a bill? Like, which would you prefer? I mean, limiting digital also just sort of like, I want to throw my hands up in the air. Selfishly, though, we at the Bureau in markets, we always saw states as labs, right? If they rolled a rule out that might have impact on a market, we could watch how the industry reacted. New York City may be on a path where it's got a significant population, and it's going to do things that are so different that you'll actually be able to observe the cost of credit impacts for consumers. And I encourage any researchers that are listening to be thinking about that.
Well, there you go. We did not answer all the questions, cover all the topics, but we opened the book when we
Steve,
start.
I got them real quick before we go. 6, 12, and Lindsay Lohan. Weren't those the answers to the questions?
Okay, you're right. Well, then we did answer all the questions. We got everything done, and now we're feeling a lot more comfortable, and doing them. But this leads to the next concept of what we're going to do, and again, I'm going to try to bring the group back together, to work more on that, with more to follow, because you guys are again right on target, hitting all the topics. This is what we got to do, and this is what we got to talk about. So let's keep this up. Does anybody want to throw out a final word before we end the session today?
Steve, you're making me feel like I'm in the cast of Blue Bloods or NCIS.
I just want us to get paid the same as what they're getting paid, so that way, we're all there. When we go to syndication, you guys will all make your fortune.
I would be remiss if I did not remind everybody that today's webinar was sponsored by CSS Impact, that all-in-one debt collection ecosystem that includes dialing, texting, emailing, web portal and client portal, Copilot AI for the agents, management Copilot on the back end, and an interactive voice agent voice bot.
Rob, is it also available within the New York City confines?
Asterisk, not available in New York City or California, but yeah, CSS is actually based out of California, so yeah, we keep our noses clean.
There you go. Stephanie, any last words? Joanne?
I mean, be like me. Spend the weekend reading the New York City rules if you haven't already, and Do it with maybe a glass of wine, right?
You might
I'll
need the whole
pass.
bottle for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Joanne, I'll give Joanne the last word. There you go.
Oh no. Oh no. Well, it's good to see everybody. I really do enjoy this, Steve. And I would love to do this more frequently just to kind of level set. I learn a lot from Stephanie, John, and Rob, and you. So it's as helpful for me as I think it is for your listeners. So thank you.
Ditto, Joanne.
Ditto on that. Absolutely. If anyone's learning anything on these, it's me. Man on the street, educating myself.
Rob, and thank you for CSS Impact for sponsoring this. And like I said, we're going to do this again because the readers they like this. They click on it and they listen to it. So they turn in for you guys. That's what they want to hear, and that's where we want to go. With that, I'm going to consider this a wrap because I know we have a hard stop. We're going to go ahead and do that. But thank you guys for getting together. We will schedule the next one shortly and get back out there and start talking about more state regulations. We just started to delve into New York City, which again is probably a case of wine.
That'll be our next topic.
Yeah, there we go. We'll know it. All right, thanks everybody, and everybody have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
See ya.